Before injuries destroyed his prime, Demarcus Boogie Cousins was one of the best centers in the NBA, transforming from an emotional troublemaker to a superstar, and then regressing to a role player. Boogie has had a roller coaster of a career, but how good was Demarcus Cousins actually, and what could have been if he remained healthy? Road to the NBA. Demarcus Cousins grew up around drugs, guns, and violence. Despite his NBA image of a bad boy, he was a good kid in a mad city. Young Demarcus never got involved in the criminal activities around him, but he didn't play basketball either. As an Alabama kid, all Demarcus wanted was to become an NFL player. However, by the age of 12, he was already 6'4", gangly, skinny, and uncoordinated. Boogie had to face the ugly truth. He sucked at football. Basketball was never on his mind, until an absolute stroke of luck determined the rest of his life. An AAU coach, Danny Pritchett, approached him in school, asking if he knew any 8th graders that might be interested in joining his basketball team. Cousins was 6'6", and Pritchett thought he was a senior. "I'm an 8th grader, sir," Demarcus replied, and soon joined Pritchett's team. It's every AAU coach's dream to find a 6'6" 8th grader, but if the student is also a hard worker, that's like winning the lottery. Boogie wasn't extremely talented, but his determination to improve was in the 99th percentile. He wanted to stay after team practice to work with Pritchett one-on-one, and when the coach couldn't make it, Demarcus worked out with Pritchett's 2 sons. By the time he entered high school, Cousins was a 6'8" forward with ball handling and passing ability of a point guard. Throughout high school, Cousins didn't date, he wasn't interested in cars, and didn't even have a driver's license. By his sophomore year, he was ranked the #1 player in the country, and the only thing that could have stopped his NBA dreams was his hot head. Cousins was always very emotional, and the opponents started to exploit that. Everybody knew that they couldn't beat him, so they started to provoke him. Boogie got pushed, punched, and baited into reacting almost every game. His teeth were knocked out 4 times during his junior and sophomore seasons. He even got into a fight with a faculty member on a school bus. Despite everything, Cousins was wanted by all major colleges, and he chose Kentucky and Coach Calipari. At the college level, Demarcus was a man amongst boys, standing at 6'10" and nearly 300 pounds, with an enormous 7'6" wingspan. Few players could handle his combination of size, length, and strength. Boogie was also extremely nimble and skilled around the basket, averaging 15 points on 56% shooting, 10 rebounds, and 2 blocks in just 23 minutes per game. After Kentucky lost in the Elite 8, Boogie put his name in the 2010 NBA draft, where he got selected as the 5th pick by the Sacramento Kings. A troubled king. Despite dominating in college, when Boogie came to the NBA, he was still extremely unrefined. Sure, he was big and strong to battle with NBA giants in the post, a great rebounder and very crafty in tight spaces around the basket. Boogie's spin moves and drop steps were a thing of beauty, and he could look like a 300-pound ballerina. However, Cousins was a terrible shooter who fell in love with his jump shot, which made him inefficient. Other than bad shot selection, Cousins was turnover-prone and a bad defender. But the biggest issue of all was still his hot head. Cousins' lack of maturity and mental focus was visible in his negative body language and lack of composure. One bad call could cause him to lose his head completely, to the point where frustrated Cousins would go full tilt and play poorly for the rest of the game, either forcing things on offense or not trying on defense. He was among the league leaders in technicals and ejections. He often fought with his coaches and beefed with media members. However, a lot of blame is also on the Sacramento Kings. They surrounded their 20-year-old number 5 pick with players also in their 20s, and mostly on short-term contracts. Cousins had no stability and no vets that could show him the ropes and teach him the politics of the NBA. In his first 3 seasons, Boogie averaged 16 points and 10 rebounds per game on 45% shooting, with more turnovers than assists. The Kings failed to win 30 games in each of those seasons and stuck at the bottom of the league. All-Star years. Despite his own emotional instability and the total chaos that were the Sacramento Kings, Boogie Cousins' game was getting better every year. He developed a great back-to-the-basket technique and became one of the most prolific post scorers in the NBA. Cousins extended his shooting range, first to the elbow and then to the three-point line. His court awareness and basketball IQ improved significantly, enabling him to become a threat in the pick and roll, not only as a finisher but also as a passer. Defensively, Boogie transformed into an above-average post defender and at times a decent help defender, depending on how much energy he was willing to spend at that end of the court. In 2014, his 4th season, Cousins averaged 23 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, all career highs. His shooting efficiency increased to 50%, and he posted personal bests in blocks and steals. However, despite his resurgence, the Kings were still a losing franchise. They kept firing coaches and making historically bad selections with their lottery picks. In 2012, they selected journeyman Thomas Robinson before Damian Lillard. Next year, they chose Ben McLemore when they could have drafted Giannis. In 2014, they drafted Nick Stauskas in front of Zach LaVine and Willie Cauley-Stein instead of Devin Booker. Constant losing, coaching changes, and disastrous front office decisions would piss off any great player, let alone Cousins with his history of acting out on the court. Boogie kept getting technicals and ejections, but his greatness as a basketball player was undeniable. In 2015, Cousins improved all of his numbers again to 24 points, 13 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game, and deservedly made the All-Star and All-NBA second team. Next season, Boogie was averaging a career-high 27 points per game and made the All-Star team again. However, with no supporting cast, no leadership, and no direction, the Kings kept losing. There was nothing Cousins could do about it. Finally, during an interview at the 2017 All-Star Game, Cousins was informed that he got traded to the Pelicans. After 7 years, 2 owners, 3 GMs, and 7 different coaches, Boogie's suffering in Sacramento had come to an end. Boogie and the Brow. In 2017, Anthony Davis and Demarcus Cousins were the most talented big men in the NBA. The only problem was that they liked to operate in the same space on the floor, and that the rest of their roster was constructed like a Frankenstein monster. Despite bad floor spacing and lack of three-point shooting, Boogie shined. He slimmed down considerably, which made him energetic enough to play the best defense of his life. Offensively, he was averaging the best shooting numbers of his career, but maybe the most impressive statistic was his 5.4 assists per game, one of the best passing numbers in the NBA for a center. Boogie looked like Nikola Jokic before Jokic even came on everybody's radar. His partnership with Davis had its flaws, but for once in his career, Cousins had some stability and quality teammates. Even more importantly, he was winning and heading towards his first playoff appearance. And then it all went down the drain. In the last minute of a game against the Rockets, Boogie fell down in pain. His Achilles was torn, and his season was over with a long recovery ahead. Injuries. If he didn't have the most devastating injury in basketball, Demarcus Cousins would be over $200 million richer. After the 2018 season, Boogie became a free agent. Instead of a maximum extension worth $200 million, Cousins signed a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Warriors. The Warriors needed a center, and Boogie wanted to be with a winning franchise, so joining the 3-time champions made perfect sense. 1 year after his injury, Boogie returned to court with diminishing returns. Cousins was turning the ball over a lot. He was generally inefficient and a minus defender. There were still traces of his all-star past, and he dazzled with a few brilliant moves, such as drives where he'd shake off defenders as if they were ants on a picnic, or the no-look assists to the Splash Brothers. Despite his bad shot selection and hindered mobility on the defensive end, Boogie was steadily improving. Towards the playoffs, he started to play more and more like his all-star self, and everybody in the world believed that the Warriors would win another championship. And then Boogie tore up his quad, KD tore his Achilles, and Klay had a torn ACL. Despite his effort to come back during the finals, it was clear that Cousins was severely hampered, and the Warriors lost the title. In the offseason, Cousins signed with the Lakers. Just 1 month later, he tore his ACL, and his 2020 season was over. In 2021, he finally returned to action for the Rockets, but in Houston, he had a problem. He was no longer Demarcus Cousins. Injuries took their toll, and Boogie couldn't keep up on the defensive end. When he was in the game, the Rockets were leaking like the Titanic after the iceberg, and Cousins was soon waived. After that, he played for the Clippers and the Bucks, who also waived him in the middle of the 2022 season. Even though he was only 31 years old, it seemed like his career might have come to an end. Thankfully, that didn't happen. His favorite coach with the Kings, Mike Malone, decided to give him another chance, and Cousins signed with Denver. During the 2022 playoffs with the Nuggets, Cousins showed that there's still a lot of Boogie left in it. He was capable on defense, he carried the team on offense when Jokic was out, and generally had a positive impact in limited minutes. He'll be a free agent again, but this time, we have no doubt that he'll continue to play in the NBA. Legacy. Unfortunately, we will never see what the best version of Demarcus Cousins could have looked like. The big man from Alabama tore his Achilles at the age of 27, at the beginning of his prime, when he was playing the best basketball of his life. Boogie endured all the worst injuries in basketball, and what were supposed to be the 5 greatest years of his career turned into a nightmare. His size, length, basketball IQ, and shooting touch were tailor-made for the modern NBA. Before the Achilles injury, he averaged 22 points, 11 rebounds, and almost 4 assists for his entire career, with 4 All-Star appearances and 2 All-NBA selections. Due to his immaturity in Sacramento, the general public somehow doesn't mourn the death of his superstar potential in the same way they did for Derrick Rose, Brandon Roy, Greg Oden, or Penny Hardaway. And that's a shame. Whatever your perception is on Boogie, it's undeniable that the injuries took away the prime of a man who was becoming a top 10 player in the NBA. If he got drafted by a better franchise, and if he remained healthy, Demarcus Cousins could have been a Hall of Famer.